Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Please forgive us for the late entry. We had bought a new webcam and was wrestling with it and trying to see how it would work. It said it was compatible with YouTube, but for some reason it wasn't working. So inshallah, we will go ahead and do with my low-level Lenovo webcam this time. So here we are. The time is ripe. Reality is penetrating, and everybody is awake and aware of something that has been happening for 4 centuries. To feel like, oh, now something new has happened because of what happened in the murder of George Floyd, and oh, now we have to have an idea or a thought about it, and now is the time to say something, then that means we've been absent for however long we've been living an adult life conscious of what's going on in America. So obviously as MCC, we have definitely give many sermons. I would say if you go on our YouTube bank, you will find maybe 10 sermons on Black lives and the racist history of America and the amazing leaders we have from the Black community in our own history as Muslims, and all of the great lessons that we need to be learning and living by. So we sent out a statement on Monday, reviewing and reminding us all of these sacred values that we have in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But right now, I think since so many people are very tuned in and focused on the issue, it's time for us to really reflect. Have I really changed according to these sermons that I've heard? Or did I hear those previous sermons that were given at MCC? What have I really done to address racism in myself, in my family, in my community, and in the world? So this is the time to make that change. As we know in the Holy Quran, our reality as a collective, as believers, is tied into the reality of our ability to reflect on who we are, what we do, and why we do it, and make the necessary changes influenced by the Quran and the Sunnah of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وإذا أراد الله بقوم سوءا فلا مرد له وما لهم من دونه من وال. Surely God does not change the condition of a people until they change themselves. If God wills a punishment on a people, then there is no turning it back, and they have no one beside Him to protect them. So we have to ask ourselves, what exactly changes do I need to make in myself? First and foremost, we have to continue to address racism as it exists in the Muslim community. If you thought that the Muslims do not have a problem with racism, then you are part of the problem. So now is today to become part of the solution. So the Quran tells us, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين. O you who have claimed faith, stand up firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it be against your own selves, your own parents, and your own family members. This verse is not an easy verse to practice. We can all preach it and say, yeah, we stand for that. That's a beautiful teaching of Islam. But are you ready to own your own complicitness and complacence in dealing with racism? That you have taken a part in racism? That you have racist tendencies? Are you ready to admit that? Are you ready to admit that you have family and friends who actually take part in racism implicitly or explicitly? That means you're going to have to call people on it at that moment. And you're going to have to rebuke people when they do it. And you're going to have to live a life promoting things that are not common and normal in your social structure. So this is our change time. It's time to embrace the change. As we said, the scriptures are abundant, but the one scripture I'd like to remember in terms of racism is that it is the fundamental quality of shaitan. He was the first racist. When he was asked, "Ma mana'aka an tasjuda iz amartuk?" What has prevented you from prostrating, from following my command? Allah is asking the shaitan, Iblis, when I have commanded you. Now, before this moment, Iblis had done everything that Allah commanded him. But now in this moment, Iblis says, قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. I am better than this human being that you have created. And now I have decided to disobey you, O Allah, because I'm better than him, because my creation was before him. You created me of something better than him. And that is this racist tendency. So when the shaitan says, when Iblis warns all of us, as Allah has quoted him in the Quran, لَأُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ, I will make attractive to them, make desirable to them, and I will command them to certain qualities. Of course, he will bring this as a main quality. So let's ask ourselves, what exactly is racism? Racism is an ideology of racial domination based on the biased belief or idea of a presumed biological or cultural supremacy or superiority of a racial group. And this is used to justify an inferior treatment or social positions of other racial groups. So many of you are saying, okay, Imam, come on, I'm Muslim, I'm not racist. Why do we have to have this khutbah? You know, we're alhamdulillah, we're Muslims. We don't even have to make any statements. We're mashallah so above racism. Again, if that's your thought process, you are part of the problem. So now is the time to embrace the solution. You know, we often tell ourselves things that we know we shouldn't be that way, or we should be in such and such way. And what we're really doing is trying to avoid our subconscious awareness or deep down awareness that we do have tendencies like that. And you're going to see whenever I bring you the examples. So we've all actually, if we study the sociology and psychology of racism and white supremacy and its influence on the world, the Muslim world was occupied or colonialized by the white Europeans for many centuries. And then they put in leaders that would support their ideas. And those leaders over there oftentimes want to fit in with or live up to those great European white folks that, you know, support their rule. So if we realize that we've internalized and have been influenced by racial tendencies, this racist tendency is in all of us in one way or another. This powerful permeating concept of white supremacy, of white privilege, even if you don't necessarily have any sort of belief deep down that the white race has some sort of superiority or that it should be looked up to as the example and that the people from whiteness represent, you know, greatness and superiority, at least you probably have taken part in or feel or are prone to white privilege, which means because you didn't live as a black person, you don't realize how easy it is for you and how you really have never been through such difficulties that the black community has been going through their entire life. And so these privileges that we get used to as non-black people. So we inherit these biases, these racist tendencies from our family, from our friends, our coworkers, from school, as we hear on the media, television programming, movies, the public attitude and mentality. And there's two ways that this bias, it manifests. So there's the explicit bias, which is thoughts and feelings and belief that one holds consciously that have racist tendencies. So I'm sure if you haven't unfortunately heard of a black person in the Muslim community being referred to as a slave, or in some languages, black being used as a negative connotation in general, but you definitely have heard Muslims referring to a negative person or a negative connotation about someone, or that that person is suspect of bad behavior, and they refer to them by their skin color. The black guy, that black guy, those black people. That is a very explicit racist statement. And if you said it, you were actively participating in promoting racism. And if someone said that in front of you and you did not call and check them on the issue at that moment, then you yourself were partaking in the promotion of racism. Silence in the face of injustice is approval. And we'll see, the Quran is very clear on these things. So this is where we have to get back to scripture. People say, Imam, you keep saying that. This is our only way. As a Muslim community worldwide, in MCC, in the Muslim countries, in California, in Brazil, in Russia, the Muslim community has fallen into this huge abyss of cultural confusion when it comes to spirituality, religiosity, identity, what it means to be Muslim, the effects of so many different racist and classist systems, the lack of any real Muslim leadership in our societies, Islam being seen as something I really only am very much exposed to on Jumu'ah or Eid. This is all an issue that we have to address. And the only way to address that is to root our thoughts and actions in scripture. Why? Because when you say you're a Muslim, you're saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. This is not the thing that we have when the new guy comes in and we say Ashhadu, and then that's the Shahada. No, the Shahada is the most commonly practiced and lived, most consequential identity reality of a Muslim's worship. Meaning, I derive my thoughts, actions, and words as a servant of God, knowing him through the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is preserved in the Quran and the Sunnah. See, if you're not thinking of an ayah or hadith when you're responding to anything in life, then you are not very much living the Shahada. Somebody might say, well, I say Muslim things. I even say Arabic phrases and stuff. Maybe you're just saying that because that's what you know you're supposed to say in the setting that you're sitting in, which is void of ikhlas. It should be a sincere notion of service to God through a knowledge that is connected to him through revelation. That's why he revealed it. He's expecting us to regularly read the revelation and think about it and live accordingly. So there are many Muslims in the Muslim community that do not want to marry a black person. There are many Muslims who wouldn't want their child to marry a black person, no matter how wealthy, no matter how religious, no matter how good of a person they are. There's going to be an issue. And you all know what I'm talking about. This is explicit racism. Because if we go back to all our scriptures, we know. So the same people who have these racist things about the black guy, and come on, I don't want you to marry this, and I've known as an imam, I've dealt with many, many people who have said blatantly, I don't want to marry someone with dark skin. The fact that you would think that that makes any difference in marriage or beauty is racism. There are many places in the Muslim world where they try to make their skin color look whiter, to be looking more beautiful. They call it mahallat al-tabyid, the whitening. You know, like how here, it's interesting. Here, we have many white women wanting to get tans and tanning beds. And so people don't realize overseas that that is an active participation in racism. To not be proud and happy and blessed in the way that Allah created you, in whichever skin color that is. That's a beautiful blessing that He has given you. And you are special like that. And everyone should, embrace who they are and the way God created them. So then there's something called implicit bias. Implicit bias is much more common, and it's because it is thoughts, feelings, and beliefs someone holds subconsciously. It's like deep down. And this is from the social conditioning. You've heard it and seen it, the mentality out there, the movies, the television. So you have these bias that deep down you feel kind of like this racist tendency. Like when someone does something you don't like and they happen to be of a black and you're not black, you'll feel more mad at them, and you'll start to feel deep down, you're not thinking about it consciously, but deep down there's a reason why you're thinking about that particular person more angry than had a white person or someone from your specific racial tone would have done or said the same thing. Be more mad because that's an implicit bias. So the only way to solve this is to really dig deep and to be humbly ready to admit that we have racist tendencies. So the fact is, around a quarter of American Muslims identify as either black or African American. Somewhere around 25% of all people who are Muslim in America are black or African American. Some people prefer that one, some people prefer that. Either way. They have a history in America that goes back to the very beginning, the black community. The black Muslims were somehow 30% of all slaves that were taken from Africa were Muslims. And so from the very beginning and foundation of this country, black Muslims have been here. So we have to appreciate that. We have to stop ignoring, dismissing, marginalizing, and alienating our black brothers and sisters in Islam. It's crucial for us to build friendships with our black brothers and sisters. We have a lot to learn from them. We need to listen and learn from the black community in America, specifically Muslims. We have to go out of our way to get to know everybody at MCC. I've said this, it's not easy. And some people say that's very hard, Imam. Maybe if you'll just do it. So they want me to be like, okay, you are going to meet with this person. I'm going to do that. But I need you to genuinely get to know people from a different race than your own, because that will remove racism. You have to lean into that discomfort of getting to know members of the black community, the Latino community. Latino means someone from Latin America, like Central and South America here. The indigenous people, if we're lucky to find a native indigenous person, then we should appreciate them. The convert community and the Muslim community, you have to get to know them. They have an experience that will help you, and particularly many of us here are, immigrants. And so that will help you in understanding how to raise your kids. So we have to get to know people who are outside of our social circles that we've become tribally comfortable with. We need black leadership in every mosque in America. Some people, if you're thinking right now, this is aggressive, like why are they coming in and taking control? This is racist thoughts. I just want you to know that. If a quarter of all Muslims in America who've been here longer than any immigrants came here, okay, there are African American Muslims in this community who can name great grandparents. My dad's granddad, who was Muslim. There are people like that here in Charlotte, North Carolina. All of them were Muslim. And so we have to appreciate that. So they have an experience that we have to elevate, that we have to have. So every mosque needs to have that. Alhamdulillah, MCC, we are proud to say that in our first two boards, our first board, we had 2 black women, and then our second board, we retained 1 black woman that got voted in for the second round. And so I expect and would assume that we would always have black leadership in the Muslim community. And we can't see them as separate. If we see them as separate, we have not fully come here and embraced Islam. We're stuck to some cultural, racial, nationalistic, just totally against Islam. If we're feeling like, the blacks have their message. It happened one time. Somebody said, we see a lot of black people coming here. They have their own masjid over there on Sugar Creek. No. That's not how it works. That's not how God's mosques are founded. And you have to wonder, why are they there? Is they there because they want to be separatist? Or would they feel comfortable integrating with everybody else? And we have to think about that one. Everybody needs to go to a mosque where they feel like they can be the fullest of who they are, and they can embrace and be embraced, and everybody feels comfortable and normal, and everybody's being treated. That's what we're doing at MCC. We have to realize that our existence as Muslims in this country in large numbers, with a general acceptance of diversity, is a result of the work of the civil rights movement led by black leaders in America. See, the Immigration Act of 1965 basically was following the Civil Rights Act of a year earlier in 1964. So the Civil Rights Act was sweeping changes in rights for the Black community. So then the year later, a natural consequence of that work by the civil rights community was the 1965 Immigration Act, which was changing how even immigrating from a non-white European country was very much limited to even be here for any reason. Now it still exists to a large extent. They say, okay, who gets citizenship now? And so some Muslim, they're saying that some Muslim countries are very big and there's so many of them. If we give them all citizenship, I'm saying if they've lived here, then they deserve it. We have work to do, brothers and sisters. And guess who paved the way for that work that we have to do? Your existence here, all the benefits you gave was on the backs of the Black rights movement of the 1960s. So if you're here making a lot of money than you would have made somewhere else, you owe it to the Black community. So now if you don't know anything about the Black community, what kind of hypocrisy have you embraced? So it's really, we have to think about what kind of mentality we have, how Islamic. Some people think, because mashallah, I pray all 5 daily prayers, I get all the sunnah prayers, and mashallah, I got my hat on, and I got my beard, and I got my, and I eat my halal, and so now alhamdulillah. No, if you have not embraced the wholeness of the Muslim community, if you've not appreciated who was it that worked to let you in the door so that you could have all these financial and opportunity blessings and benefits. This is where we really have to think about what it means to be Muslim. Muslim is not just praying prayers and growing beards. It is much deeper, much broader, much larger, much more intense of a lifestyle rather than just some acts of worship. So we're all either American Muslims or raising American Muslims. Some people don't see themselves as American Muslims. I would advise you to embrace, if you choose to live here, I think you need to own it. You chose to live here. But if you didn't, still you're raising American Muslims, which is fine. Now, how do I raise these kids to best grow up as Muslim and American? Because they are both. And there's no way you cannot make your kids believe if they're growing up here that they are from somewhere else that maybe they visited a couple of times in their life for some months. They're not from there. They will never fully relate to being from there. They have a heritage from there. And in Islam, we should appreciate the family and the broader understanding of the connection of family ties and wound. That's a spiritual concept of loving and appreciating those people, learning their culture. But in terms of who they are, where they're from, and how they deal with that, they're American Muslim. Anyone born here, raised here, they are. You have to embrace that fact. That's why we put it in our mission statement. Because we're not going to succeed if we give our kids a confused identity crisis to grow up in. And so part of that is embracing the African American community. And the more we have African Americans in our community, the more comfortable they feel, the more they feel empowered and embraced and loved, the more successful we will be as American Muslims and growing up in America here. So we have to learn about Black history. We have to learn about the history of racism in the United States, the civil rights struggles. We need to know, who is Emmett Till? Who is Medgar Evers? These are names that you should know who they are. Who is Marcus Garvey? If you don't know who these people are, if you don't know anything about them, you're lost as an American Muslim. We have to know about the great contributions of Black Americans. We have to also learn the struggles and history and contributions of the Native Americans, the indigenous people, the Latino community, and other peoples of this society. We have to read anti-racism literature. It is not sufficient to be not racist. You have to be an anti-racist. So this seems extreme, Imam. No, because if you're not racist, then you're easily to fall into implicit bias. But if you're consciously anti-racist, then you're going to be very strongly focused and conscious of the permeating, influencing broadly socially acceptable racism. So once we become educated, then we can truly appreciate and embrace the intersectionality, the overlap of the issues of racism, xenophobia. Xenophobia means fearing of other cultures, fearing of foreigners. xenophobia. Okay, so racism, xenophobia, and Islamophobia are all intersectional. They're all overlapping. So we have to study all of them. We have to appreciate what the Jewish community has gone through in this country and how they reached this great place of respect and power and influence in this society. They worked hard for that. They went through a lot. Some people think, oh yeah, they just loved them from day one. They did not. They went through what we're going through for some time. And to the extent they still are. So then once we know about all this, once we become educated, first and foremost by getting to know Black Americans, specifically Black Muslim Americans, getting to know and listen to their story. And we're reading anti-racist literature. We're reading about the American history that we've chosen to live in. So now we can become activists for justice. One brother once told me, he said, Imam, why do you always talk about activism? Because it's all Islam is about is activism. The Quran, the single most common and most prevalent prohibition in the Quran, the worst sin of humanity is oppression, al-dhulm. Oppression is the thing that is most prohibited in the Quran. And what is oppression? It means someone with power is using their influence and power to create harm or limit the rights and abilities of those that are under their power. Islam is all about removing that. Because why? Al-izzatu lillahi jami'a. The dignity and might and greatness is for God, not for any person, not for any race, not for any gender, not for any school of thought, not for any nation, not for anything. Inna Allaha ya'muru bil-'adl. The most fundamental verse of Islamic law in the Quran. Verse number 90, chapter number 16, Surah An-Nahl. Inna Allaha ya'muru bil-'adl. Surely God commands to justice. That's the first and foremost thing that has to exist in a society for there to be welfare and goodness. That's why they say no peace until there's justice. What do you mean? I'm supposed to be living in peacefully while I'm oppressed? Or I'm living peacefully while my neighbor's oppressed? Or while there's systematic oppression in my society, I'm just supposed to go about my business normal because it doesn't hurt me? What kind of Muslim is that? It's no kind of Muslim. This is someone who's completely confused about Islam. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You were made the best of all nations, and you were brought forth for the benefit of mankind, as you command and enjoin and promote all that is good and healthy, and you rebuke and stand up against all evil and corruption. And you do this because you believe in Allah. The Quran talks about nations destroyed, and it relates their being destroyed to their lack of standing up for justice or prohibiting evil. فَلَمَّا نَسُوا مَا ذُكِّرُوا بِهِ أَنْجَيْنَا الَّذِينَ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ السُّوءِ وَأَخَذْنَا الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا بِعَذَابٍ بَئِيسٍ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْسُقُونَ. And when the people forgot the revelations and the prophethood that was sent to them, then we brought a punishment, but we saved in the royal we. He says, who do we save? Who does God save whenever their punishment comes down because people have left revelation, stop following it? Those who prohibited evil in their society. That's the description as we find here at the end of Surah Al-A'raf. Verse number, I think, 165. And then we took the oppressors with a very strong punishment because they rebelled against the revelation. وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ لِيُهْلِكَ الْقُرَى بِظُلْمٍ وَأَهْلُهَا مُصْلِحُونَ. God would never destroy any city or village because of their oppression as long as there are people working hard to repair society and do good in society. So he's saying that if there are not people who are working hard for repairing society, and he's speaking to people of revelation, the Muslims, then they will be destroyed along with whoever else is doing the oppression around them. If you're not doing something about oppression, then you're taking part in it. So, brothers and sisters, the issue of white supremacy, systemic racism, police brutality is our fight. It's our fight. We have to be on the front lines. We have to be working with other people of faith, other people of activism. We have to be working with the city governments. We have to be pressuring the police departments and law enforcement to eradicate this problem. And we must not stop. We must not be like, oh yeah, we said something because George Floyd was murdered, and now here we're, saying something and all that, rah, rah, rah. And then a month from now, 2 months from now, same old, same old. This is not what we're about here at MCC. Why? Because we're really trying to prevent us from becoming complacent, a lack of firm resolve, devotion to God, striving for excellence, nurturing American Muslims engaged in the service of society. We envision a Charlotte community built on virtue and cooperation. This is our mission and vision statement. It's pure Islam, pure Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, purely taken from the experience of the seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and placed right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we have to be all on the front lines of this. So, brothers and sisters, as I ask Allah to bless us to be a people who truly commit ourselves to the work of Islam and don't just allow ourselves to be comfortably affiliated with Islam, hoping that inshallah, when we die, all these important things we learned from today's khutbah that is so much in the Quran, so much the Prophet Muhammad's example and what we're expected to do as believers, that inshallah we don't have to do any of that. Imam's going to do it. He has a few people with him. He's working with some of these other folks in the community, and they'll take care of that. No, we need a whole entire community working on many levels to solve this problem, because this problem affects all of us. Islamophobia is only acceptable because racism is acceptable before Islamophobia was acceptable. When people get it through their heads that you cannot judge a whole category of people because of what some may or may not have done, that is what we're trying to get to here. And that in the American experience is centered in the issue of white supremacy and white privilege as it dominated and suppressed and oppressed and marginalized the Black people of this community. So we have to stand with them. We have to stand with their cause and center their voices, listen to them, learn from them. So we're going to be having a live showing of a gripping, informative documentary that I've seen years ago when it first came out, called I Am Not Your Negro. So on Sunday, we're going to be doing a Zoom cast when we will basically have a live screening of this documentary that is powerfully gripping his history right in front of your eyes. One of the great scholars of the civil rights movement, James Baldwin, he will tell us the story. He will help us to understand. And then we will have a little discussion about that. And then next week, we have some panels on Zoom with some of our African-American community leaders that we want to embrace and engage a healthy listening session and to learn and ask questions about what they've been through, what it's like, what we can do, what we can do to be better as a Muslim community, as a community that is working for the cause of social justice in the face of racism. So that will be next weekend. We've sent out an email with that. I believe the Saturday is for teens alone from 11 to 17. I think will be a healthy way to do that. I mean, this documentary, I think 11 and up would be good. I mean, it's mainly for adults and there is some problematic things. So it's up to you how you feel about your children hearing some foul language and some violent scenes. It's PG-13 kind of thing. So that's going to be on Sunday at 3:00, the Zoom showing of I Am Not Your Negro. Next weekend at Saturday, there will be a teen forum and discussion, I think at 4 p.m. And then on Sunday, there will be an adult session at 4 p.m. So may Allah bless everybody. Ask Allah to give us true sincerity to live out His message as He has called us, that our purpose is truly defined by the revelation that He revealed and preserved and supported with miraculous support and fortification throughout the life of our beloved Prophet ﷺ up until this day, and that we see the value in such a very important, crucial reality. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.